everyone. Let's call to order the meeting of the Fire and Police Commission on February 22nd at 4:02 p.m. Ms. Clerk, can you do roll call?
Commissioner Herlinger. Present. Commissioner Jones.
Aquí.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Present.
Vice Chair Hill.
Present.
Chair Dozer.
Here. Okay. Commissioners and Ms. Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any changes to the agenda.
Okay. Let's go ahead then and move on to the next item, which I believe is number 4. Ms. Clerk, do we have any cards for public comment or hands raised?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any public comment.
Great.
Question.
Yes?
There was a comment that was delivered
Mailed in?
electronically.
Yeah.
Is this the space for that, or is that going to be separate?
That's an excellent question.
Chair Dozer and Commissioner Jones, we acknowledge that as public comment received as part of the meeting minutes, but written public comment is not usually read out loud during commission meetings. You can reference it during the commission and staff communications if you'd like as well.
Ms. Clerk, could you please read our first agenda item?
Absolutely. Item number 5, approval of meeting minutes from January 25th, 2024.
Okay, are there any changes to the January 25th, 2024 minutes? No? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any public comment for that item?
Chair Dozer, we do not have public comment.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the...
Move to approve.
What?
Second.
Okay, I don't know who said what, so somebody said yes, and someone said second. I believe it was Commissioner Jones and then Commissioner Hill.
Okay.
All right, any discussion or objections? Not seeing or hearing any? Let's go ahead and vote.
I don't have it on my calendar.
Can we reboot the screen? Can we do an oral vote?
Yeah, we can do an oral vote?
I think so.
You're still on mic, so.
How about an oral vote, folks? All in favor of approving the minutes as they were submitted?
And the clerk will roll call your names again.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Herlinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hill.
Yes.
Chair Dozer.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 6, Santa Barbara Fire Department Annual Data Presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Dozer, members of the Commission. Chris Males, your Fire Chief. With me to my right, your left, is Ryan DiGiulio. He's our Fire Marshal. He's going to be here to answer any specific fire prevention questions that are going to come up during this presentation. So we're going to begin. This is an annual report of mostly our incidents, but we are going to talk about fire prevention and public education and the amount of outreach we do in the community. Our calls for service are just a part of what we do in the community. But we are going to begin with our calls for service, and I'll get right into it. To answer the question that's probably the most burning question today is how many calls did the fire department run last year? Well, I'll tell you it was 11,560 calls, and we'll get to that in a slide. But what's important is data collection. And data collection drives our decision making. It drives the services that we provide. And the way that we collect data is via what's called the National Fire Incident Reporting System, also known as NFIRS. Each one of our reports is loaded and ends up going to the state, and then eventually it ends up going to the feds. And at the end of the year, when you hear how many fires there were in the United States, how many firefighters were injured or killed, civilians, all of that comes out of these reports that are created down at the local government, local fire department level. So first I want to talk about the codes. There are literally hundreds of types of codes for calls that we would respond to. Everything from a medical emergency to a power line down. But there are 9 general codes. And so we're going to start with the basics, which are the 9 generals, the 100 series, which are fires. Now, fire, and there's a whole bunch of different types of calls within that, and I'll show you. Overpressurization, rupture, explosion. 3 is rescue and EMS. This is by far the most active part of our job. 400 is hazardous conditions, 500 service calls, 600 good intent calls, 700 false alarms and false calls, 800 is severe weather and natural disaster, and your 900s are special types of incidents. So there's the 9 codes, but then what happens is each of these are divided up into many, many subgroups. So you can see under fire that includes everything from a structure fire to a vegetation fire to a car fire to overpressurization of equipment to excessive heat, et cetera. You'll see our down below, going from top to bottom, our rescue and EMS, which is the 300 series. Medical assist, EMS, extrication, that would include vehicle accidents, vehicle rollovers, et cetera. Our hazardous condition calls are the 400 series, and you can see that that's spills, leaks, that kind of thing. Service calls are our more what we call lower acuity calls. Person in distress could be someone that has a child that's locked themselves into a bathroom, or and that can also be a lockout or a lock-in, but it's our lower type of acuity calls. We have what are called good intent calls, and by far the biggest is dispatched and canceled en route. What happens, we will get called for a medical emergency, and 3 or 4 minutes into the incident, we'll get a message back from dispatch that said the patient has been transported by private vehicle. Mom or dad took the child to the hospital, decided not to wait for the ambulance, that kind of thing. Occasionally, that will also include a vehicle accident in certain situations. It would include, say the police department got on scene first of a traffic accident and couldn't locate anything. That would be a canceled en route. We have our false calls and false alarms, and we have severe weather calls, and then we have our special type of incident. That's when it just doesn't fit in anything, and we have very few of those. So that's just a sampling of our larger percentage types of calls that we go on. But looking at last year was 11,560 calls. We had a total of 220 fires, so that goes back to what's a fire. You can go back to that long list that can include everything from a structure to a vegetation fire to a car fire, et cetera. Rescue and EMS is by far our largest percentage. We had 7,552 medical and or EMS responses. 570 hazardous condition calls, 224 service calls, 2,300 good intent calls, almost 2,400. And again, the largest percentage of that is dispatched and canceled en route. 600 fire alarms. So you'll see that we're averaging about 65% medical. That is very normal for an urban fire department. If we were to drill down by district, you would see that some of our districts have higher medical response call volume than other districts. 2% for fires is that is that normal? Yes, that actually is fairly normal. Now, under that 2%, I can share with you that we had about, we did have 40 structure fires. So that is actual fires in a residence, not a false alarm, not a fire alarm, not a fire out when we showed up. Those are actual structure fires. We had several vegetation fires also. Fairly normal, and I think a large reason why we don't have as many fires and we are able to catch the fires a lot quicker is often due to the great work of our fire prevention staff that's here. All of our fires are required to be investigated. So at some level, the engine company captain on the incident can investigate the fire. For example, if it's a trash can and they locate a cigarette butt, the engine company captain can do that investigation, and that's a legally compliant state of California investigation. But if it gets any more complex, we have fire investigators that are on call, and we'll share those numbers of how often they were called to assist. So there's just a basic pie chart of our activity for the whole year. A little bit about response times now. I know I've drilled into response times over the last few months with you and talked about turnout time and travel time. So let's start at the very beginning. Someone calls 911. The dispatcher picks up the call, and our dispatch center has a phenomenal call pickup time. It is typically picked up in around less than 5 seconds. They have a dispatcher on the phone saying, 911, what is the address of your emergency? That actual introduction is really key to starting out the success of the phone call, and it lets the caller know that, hey, we're 911, but what is the address of your emergency? That's the first thing we didn't know, because if the call is disconnected or something goes wrong, we at least have an address. So, and then they figure out the call type, and that call processing time is how long it takes on the fire department side to either find out that it's a trash can on fire, it's a medical emergency, and if it is a medical emergency, our dispatchers are trained in what is called EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch, and they ask a series of questions that are designed to assess the acuity or how sick the patient is. That's done very, very rapidly. It's a system that's online, and as soon as the call type is entered, it launches onto the computer and they start asking questions. Believe it or not, it is so sophisticated that there is actually a direct correlation between the questions that are asked by the dispatcher on the telephone and the patient's overall outcome. There is a correlation between the questions that get asked and how the patient ends up doing all the way at the other end of the hospital. So it's very sophisticated. So there's the call processing time. That takes time to ask questions. Then there's the dispatch time. How long does that take to alert the units? There's what's called turnout time. We've talked about this before. That's how long, they also call it reflex time. How long after the lights go on in the station are the wheels rolling and the fire engine is rolling out the door? And then there's travel time. And at the end, that equals total response time. So we'll go through that. So our dispatch call processing time, and I want to give a caveat to this because this is a general number for medical response. It's about 2 minutes. However, this isn't drilling down into the acuity of the call. I'm going to give you an example. If the caller calls and says, my baby is not breathing, that call is launched very quickly. If someone calls and says, I'm taking care of my mother and she's fallen, we actually don't even know if she's hurt at that point. So then they will launch a series of questions to decide, is she hurt, is she not hurt, and if she is hurt, what level of acuity are we dealing with? Do we have a hurt toe, or do we have somebody that's unconscious? So that takes time to go through that, what's called the EMD process. So that call processing time we also include in the actual dispatch of the units. I've shared with you before that we use an automated system of dispatching our units. It is incredibly quick. So the dispatcher is asking for this example, key medical questions. They get to what's called a launch determinant. That means they've wrapped up their questions and they know who they need to send. They already have the address. The computer dispatch makes a recommendation. They hit one button and the automated voice, the whole computerized system with automated voice goes to the station, the lights go on. So we now kind of put call processing and dispatch time in together because of the automated system that we're using. It's really fast. From the time they hit the keystroke to the time that the lights are on and it is voicing in the station is less than a half a second. So it's very quick. So then the next two are turnout time. And so we looked at turnout time for the entire year, and we have 3 shifts, A, B, and C shift. They work 48-hour or 24-hour shifts, but they work 2 24s back to back. So across the year, there are 3 different shifts that are can be on duty. Only one is on duty at a time. And so we looked at their average turnout time, and you'll see that it's really averaging about 82 seconds. Now, once again, I love data, but there's also outliers that can be in data. I've done it myself. Get in the fire truck, you drive to the scene, you realize, oh my gosh, I never went en route to the call. And so your turnout time ends up being very long. So we try to exclude those outliers, but we're under a minute and a half. And in fact, if we drill down even further, we do have some 2-story fire stations, and their turnout time is a little bit slower than our small 1-story stations. We always work on decreasing call processing time. And when I go back to the automated system that we used, that was a tremendous advance in our call processing time. We always work on turnout time, getting to the rigs quicker. Our fire personnel now have alerting on their personal phones. They'll have them on their watches. Sometimes before the lights have even gone off in the station, they know they've got a call because it pushed through either Pulse Point or our automated system. So we're always working on that. Our travel time, you'll see averages around 4:10, 4:15. So that's really normal in the city of Santa Barbara, and that's actually very good. I always tell people, I had a captain tell me when I'd been on the department about a week, he said, hey, you can't get there from here. And meaning that it's really difficult to get to some areas of the city. And we have very narrow streets. We have a lot of stoplights and stop signs. Our fire trucks weigh 40,000 pounds. Our folks drive very defensively and very safely. And it's tough to make up travel time, to change travel time. There's some devices that are out and available. They call them traffic preemption devices, and that's where you have a light on the fire truck that actually changes the light signal. We do have some intersections that are already set up for that. But we do trend fairly consistently in about the 4-minute travel time. So what does that all add up to? Our average code 3, that means lights and siren, from the time that the dispatcher picks up the call to the time that our fire truck is on scene is about 7 minutes and 6 seconds. Again, that's an average. The national standard is 6:15. However, they don't specify what percentile that should be. I can also tell you over the years that that time is actually going down. How does that number get changed? Well, one of the things that can slow us up is a structure fire response, where we have to put all of our equipment on before we get into the rig. So that changes our time to on scene, because that does take a minute to put all of our equipment on. So it's a pretty subjective number. We'd love to get down to 6 minutes. I think that each year we do get better, and again, that is largely due to technological advances. I mentioned too, our dispatch system and traffic preemption are 2 ways that time is trending downward. Okay, shifting away from our overall response time, I've been asked before, what is our percentage of calls to the unhoused in the city of Santa Barbara? We pulled up 2023. Of our 11,560 calls, we had 1,397 calls for the unhoused, which is 12.1%. However, I want to caution us that that number can be a little bit subjective. To our fire personnel, that is confirmed to be an unhoused person. Let me give you a scenario. Engine 71 on Carrillo Street gets dispatched to Stearns Wharf for a bonfire on the beach. They get there, there's nobody there. They extinguish the fire. Was it someone who was unhoused that lit the fire, or was it two high school kids? Unless they have absolute confirmation that it's someone who's unhoused, they will not, what we call, check the box, which there is a box in our incident reporting that says, did this involve the unhoused? I did look at the last couple of months, or I did look at January, and we're trending at about 12% still. So it's throughout the whole year, and the first month of January, we're still at about 12%. Training. The most important job of a firefighter besides responding to calls is training. I'm showing you pictures of just a few of the types of training that we go to. You can see on the upper left, that is actually after an actual fire. And what we're doing in the upper left is what's called an AAR, an after action review, or we'll call it a tailboard chat. And what we'll do is very quickly get the group together and go, okay, how'd it go? What went right? What went wrong? Okay, cool. Really quick, down and dirty, could be 30 seconds to 5 minutes. The upper right is one of our urban search and rescue drills. That's at the Douglas Family Preserve. We do a lot of training at the Douglas Preserve, so that's a high-angle rescue drill. The lower left, which looks like we're all standing around a dinner table, that's actually a vegetation management scenario, or a vegetation fire scenario, sorry. And then lower right is an auto extrication drill. We're really fortunate to be able to partner with the tow companies and wrecking yards in Santa Barbara, and we can call and say, hey, we need some vehicles. And they'll tow them down to our drill tower, and we get to work on them. And with all of the advances in cars and vehicles, from airbags to seatbelt post-tensioning systems to electric cars, dealing with cars has become a very significant hazard for us. So we do a lot of training. 15,117 hours of training, and that is documented training. There's a lot more training that goes on. There's a lot of, hey, we're heading back to the station. Hey, pull over right here. Hey, what if there was a fire coming out the front window of this house? What would we do about that? And we'll do those kind of chats for 10 or 15 minutes that never make it into the drill, to the drill logs. But we typically train on fire, EMS, technical rescue, leadership development with our succession plan has become a big deal. Water rescue, hazardous materials, ARF is aircraft rescue firefighting. And then, of course, vehicle operations, vehicle rescue, et cetera. Community outreach. This is just representative of some of the highlights of what we did this year. In 2023, our community outreach, bilingual public outreach coordinator, who coordinates all of this, she doesn't do it alone, but she is the person behind the organization. Very proud to say that we had 37 radio appearances this year, 21 of which were in Spanish. We also had an advanced CERT class taught entirely in Spanish, and Commissioner Rodriguez came to the graduation. There was 15 students in that, an advanced Citizens Emergency Response Team program. We had a teen CERT. We also did a CERT program at Santa Barbara City College. We do multiple community evacuation drills. Just today received a request from a business asking us, saying they're going to be doing a fire alarm drill, a fire drill, and wanted to know if we could help with that. We get them all the time. So we had 400 documented participants that took place, that we handled with community evacuation drills. And then Fire Safety House, we go out and teach the third graders about fire safety. We had 380 participants in that program over the last year. Fire Prevention Bureau. You sure you don't want to do this? He's standing up here. I gotta let him talk. Here you go. There you go.
Good afternoon, Chair Dozer, Commissioners. Ryan DeGiulio, Fire Marshal for the City Fire Department. We'll give Chief Mills a break for a second here. I'm in charge of the Fire Prevention Bureau over the City Fire Department. We are a small but mighty task-oriented group that gets a lot done in the community. It's to both benefit the community and also our folks within the fire service, keeping them as safe as we can. So some of the highlights from last year. We are part of the community development group within the city. So when it comes to inspections for new buildings, new construction, we get involved in those. When are fire sprinklers required? How are they installed? Who checks on those? We are the folks that do that. And it comes down to everything within inside of a new building, panic hardware to emergency lighting to fire alarms. We take a look at those on plans, then we go out there and inspect them. Speaking of plans, we did over 1,200 plan checks last year, and that's, again, those new developments that happen in town or the tenant improvements, remodels that happen within current structures within the city. We make sure that they are within current fire code, building code, municipal code standards, so that we can keep the visitors and the permanent residents safe within those buildings, and that our folks also have a chance to suppress any kind of emergency that might happen inside those buildings. Within my Fire Prevention Bureau, we have 2 certified fire investigators, and myself makes 3. We just hired one other person that started 2 days ago that we're very excited about, who is also certified as a state fire investigator. So last year we got called out to 56 of those fire investigations. As Chief Males mentioned earlier, sometimes the scope and scale of a certain incident gets out of the comfortability range of an engine company captain, or there's circumstances they discover on scene that might be something that's a little out of their wheelhouse, so they'll ask us to come in. We're sworn peace officers through the fire code and the penal code. We actually are one of the few departments on the Central Coast in a fire investigator role that will follow that case all the way through court. We'll take it to court, we'll testify if we need to. So we had 56 of those call outs last year. Some of those are arson, a lot of them are not. So you might hear the nomenclature, oh, you're an arson investigator. No, we're fire investigators, because not every fire is an arson. So that's where we come in and decide which route we're going to take based off evidence we have there. Of those fire investigations, like I mentioned earlier, we had 11 court appearances last year. We help out with Liliana in the public outreach section with her awesome events she does. It's so fun to go out and do these public education events. I love to going out and doing this fire safety house with the third graders. That's absolutely hilarious to me. I have a great time doing that. But we do fire extinguisher drills for companies that need that training. We go to our residential care facility places and teach them about slip and fall hazard prevention. So it's a very wide scope that we do when it goes to community outreach. Our wildland urban interface area, the high fire hazard areas, we do a lot of community outreach in those areas as well. We did 11 miles of vegetation road clearance, which is a program that we do up in the high fire hazard areas to help the folks in case of an emergency be able to leave those kind of major roadways within the Riviera if there's an emergency, and also gives us a chance to get in. If any of you have driven up there, it gets tight. It gets very tight. So we clear that vegetation back every year. We did 93 defensible space inspections last year, which is a program we're really trying to push to the community. So what those entail is a homeowner can call us, and for free we'll go out to your residence and we'll give you suggestions and tools and ideas to harden your home in case the next wildfire comes down, and what kind of vegetation you should remove or clear, People get scared to call because they think we're going to moonscape their entire yard or tell them to do that, and that's not the case at all. It's actually a really good program, and the more of those folks we can have calling in for us to come out there, the better. A super exciting thing that we did this last year is we hired our 5-person vegetation management crew from a grant, thanks to the Coastal Conservancy. These were 5 eager young men and women that went out there and helped us accomplish some of the vegetation management tasks that we have under our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So they went out there, and last year they cleared 75 acres of vegetation by hand. They're hardworking young people, and it really helps make that mosaic fire break throughout our high fire hazard areas. And this year they focused a lot on the city parks, so Parma Park, Schofield Park a little bit, Elings Park, and that's going to expand next year, so we're excited about that.
Just one small addition. Really, I think the top picture really highlights the epitome of collaboration in the city of Santa Barbara. The lady on the left is actually Monique. She is the Parks and Rec biologist. And so the grant from the Coastal Conservancy had us working in city parks. And so this was a collaboration with the Parks and Rec Department. And we each supplied what we would call our subject matter experts. So the parks had biologists, and we provided the work to get it done. And so I think it's just a testament to how well all of the departments, not just public safety, but all of the departments work so well together in the city of Santa Barbara.
Thanks, Chief. And just this afternoon, we did a walk of Douglas Family Preserve, and we're going to figure out what we're going to do there next year. So the program's expanding, and it's getting very exciting. Another part of the Fire Prevention Bureau that we engage with our engine companies is the Engine Company Inspection Program. And what this program is the folks on the fire engines go out and once every 2 years try to get into every business within the city to make sure that their fire and life safety codes are up to date, they're in compliance. It's a lot of it is public engagement and public education on how they can make their places safer. There's about 3,300 of those inspections. They completed 2,100 of those. So it's actually a lot of, not only is it the engine companies and the fire department as a whole getting out there and making sure our community is safe through these fire and life safety inspections, it's also seeing those folks out in the public, right? The interaction beyond just performing the inspection is valuable too. It's really fun when families walk by and they go, look, fire engine, and all of a sudden the kids are in the fire engine and they're wearing stickers. So it goes way beyond just completing an inspection. So it's good to have those folks out there completing those, and we get a lot of those accomplished every 2 years.
So we'll conclude with just a couple of interesting stats that I didn't actually put in the presentation, but figured you might like to know. The busiest days of the week for the fire department are Thursdays and Saturdays. The busiest times are, of course, between 8 and 5. We also have an uptick of calls around 7 to 8 o'clock at night. Our slowest time is between 2 and 4 in the morning, with a sharp increase in call volume about 5 in the morning. Our busiest months are August, September, and December. Our slowest month this last year was February. Of the 11,560 calls, 2 of our stations, Station 7 up on the Riviera and Station 8 at the airport, only ran about 325 of those calls. So the remainder of the 11,200 plus calls is handled by 6 of our fire stations. So really, the average in the kind of the downtown, from the Mesa to the Lower East Side to San Roque area, our apparatus are averaging about 5 calls a day. Our busiest station is Station 1. We have an engine and a ladder truck at that station. That station ran 3,271 calls. So averaging about 8 to 9 calls a day out of that station. So, just some fun facts to round out the rest of the presentation. And that is the end of our presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any public comment.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions or comments?
We can't press the thing, but I have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Rodriguez.
So thank you for including the unhoused data in your reporting. It's always interesting and to see that, how much, what was that percentage?
12.1.
12% of all calls. That's a large amount for a small number of people in our community. So thank you for including that in your reporting. I'm curious, I really appreciate the firehouse project, and is it Donut?
Donuts, the dog?
Donut's the dog, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's great for young people to interact with folks in uniform in a non-crisis situation, so it gets them familiar and not as scared of folks. I'm curious if you can highlight some programs that you're doing with specifically Spanish-speaking, maybe new immigrant adults who might benefit from non-crisis interaction.
We're just trying to decide we both are just chomping at the bit to answer the question. So I think our most successful program for Spanish-speaking and immigrants is our Listos program. Our Listos program was largely started by Liliana, and the program has taken off across the nation. Liliana has become a expert in education across all immigrants across the entire country, and actually has been tied in with national organizations, including FEMA, to help teach the program and to roll the curriculum out across the United States. So it's been incredibly successful. So she teaches Listos here in Santa Barbara. Of course, it expanded into the county and then went across the state. Her first, she first was dealing at the state, and then once it hit the state, then it went across the United States. And so many communities across the United States has adopted the Listos program. So, but you know, we can't, as big as that program is, it would be remiss of me to not talk about the 21 radio appearances she had on Spanish radio, because as big as Listos can get and as many people as we can teach, we're limited with how many people we can teach at a time. But the radio goes, you know, across the airwaves, and we don't know how many people are listening. And she provides great education, fire safety messages. She spends a great deal of time educating and really breaking down barriers of encouraging people to call when they need help. And she's outstanding at that. And there is a fear of they don't want to call 911, but we provide what's called equity of care, and we respond, and we're proud of that response. And so I've always told my firefighters that when someone calls 911, they've lost control of their life, and they have asked us to come help them. And what an honor it is to have a total stranger at 3 o'clock in the morning open their door and invite you into their home. No matter how small the call is. It can be someone's grandmother who slipped and fell, or it can be the house on fire. And so that message that we carry of encouragement, of that we are here for you, Liliana does a great job on a daily basis, as do all of our firefighters, all of our fire prevention staff. They do a great job of getting that message out to the community.
And Commissioner Rodriguez, I wanted to add, because I've been very closely involved with the Listos program, we have a longstanding partnership with Immigrant Hope and the Immigrant Legal Defense Center here in the city of Santa Barbara. And a lot of our Listos classes have been hosted at Immigrant Hope in coordination with their staff. So Liliana also has built a really strong network through WhatsApp, which is the platform that's most comfortable and utilized by folks internationally. And she puts out alert notifications that we are processing through the city through WhatsApp to that LISOS network. So people are getting information where they feel comfortable accessing it as well.
As someone who came from community that was afraid to call for help, I genuinely and truly appreciate the efforts that you take, the proactive efforts that you take to build and maintain community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you. Thank you, gents, for the presentation. If you will indulge me, I do have a few questions.
Okay.
First, with regards to the codes and the general categories that you mentioned, does each type of incident have, like under the general categories, have its own like call codes or call services? So, for example, you have all the different definitions of types of fire, and it's all under the call series 100. Are there sub-call series for a type of fire, like 101, 102, or something like that? Is that how it works?
Yes, correct. It gets a little more complicated than that, but on the National Fire Incident Reporting side, yes, it does get, I'll give you an example, vehicle fire. Is that a passenger car? Is it a pickup truck? Is it a semi-truck? So there's a lot of subcodes under each one of those. However, the converse is true for medical. So on the National Fire Reporting side, it will just say medical emergency. We have a completely separate reporting system that is under medical confidentiality. And so that is where we get into the chest pain, the broken hip, the nosebleed, what have you. None of that appears in the NFIRS report because that's a public document.
Got it.
So when a medical call is run, if you look at the NFIRS report, the narrative in the NFIRS report will say CEPCR, which is Electronic Patient Care Report. And then that's where all of the information on we don't even have the patient's name on the NFIRS side. It's all housed under the confidential side.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. And you had mentioned legally compliant investigations. Could you, and what does that mean? And then what's like a illegally or a legally not compliant investigation?
I'll take the first stab at that. What that means is in the state of California, every fire is required to be investigated. If we did not investigate a fire, if we showed up to a 5-acre fire and went, whatever, we're just going to put the fire out and leave, we as a fire department are not being legally compliant. They all have to be investigated to a certain extent. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, Commissioner Jones, and to take it the next step further, when we do conduct our investigations, there's a very tight protocol and standards to do that within compliance. My friends in the police department do that a lot more than we do, but we dip into a little bit of law enforcement work because we need to know those laws and rights that people have if we're conducting an investigation, right? So you can illegally or unlawfully conduct an investigation by the way you go about conducting that investigation. So when we go out and process a scene or take interviews or get all the pieces of the pie we need to do for an investigation, we're doing it under the legal means that has been afforded to us, but also under those codes and standards and protocols that have been accepted either locally, at a state level or a national level, because we don't know if any of these are going to court. And if one chain of that link is broken, that whole case can get dismissed. So that's how it can be kind of miscued, if that makes sense.
Are there investigations that are legally compliant that you do not that you have to like source out, or are these all conducted within the department?
So if they happen in our jurisdiction, we're required to do that. Now, that doesn't mean I can't ask for assistance, right? Especially if it's something really big. Think Thomas Fire, right? Think some very large natural or man-made disaster. Right. My staff of 3, even though we can do a lot, we can't handle all that. So I can call the state. I can call ATF. I can call the FBI if I had to, the Department of Justice. All of these are at my fingertips, just like my law enforcement friends who come in and assist us. There are national fire investigators that work for ATF. There are state fire investigators that work for CAL FIRE. So we can pick up the phone and ask for help just like we do when there's a wildfire and you see fire engines from all over the place. We can do that within that little fire investigation field as well.
Thank you. I had a question about the emergency medical dispatch, the EMD, and you had talked about it's very sophisticated. Is it utilizing, like you mentioned, when the questions are such that there's a correlation between that and what happens with the patient, if you will, the subject. Is it, do I dare say, is it AI generated? So I'm wondering, the question is really, is it a smart system such that, like you do with standardized tests like the GRE, or even that the K through 12 kids take, the answers will determine what the next question will be. So if you if you ask a question that's determinate about maybe someone's having a chest pain, and then will that then will the system then direct the questions accordingly? I guess, does that make sense?
Absolute sense. And your question is absolutely correct, Commissioner Jones. So there are a few what they call case entry questions that every patient or every caller is asked. That's the age of the patient, the status of breathing, and status of consciousness. All of those questions are asked. Then what is asked is a chief complaint. Once the chief complaint is asked, let's say chest pain, then they enter chest pain in, and it automatically takes them to the template for chest pain.
Right.
Okay? Same thing for diabetic. Is the patient take insulin for their diabetes? When was the last time they took their insulin? And then also ask patient presentation questions. For example, with a diabetic, is the patient conscious and speaking appropriately? Is their skin sweaty and cool to the touch? That would indicate a hypoglycemic event. Right. And then after those questions are asked, it automatically puts the patient into one of 5 categories, ascending order of severity. So they can be, it goes A, B, C, D, and E. Those are the levels. Mm-hmm. E, which is also known as an echo response, is the most serious medical emergency that we could be responding to, typically involving a significant compromise of breathing and or consciousness. So for example, if somebody calls and they are in cardiac arrest, that call is processed very quickly, the apparatus are launched, and then the dispatcher goes through what they call PDIs, which is post-dispatch instructions, and that's where they're giving the instructions of how to do CPR. Okay. We actually have what are called the 3 Cs. That's the most significant impact that a dispatcher can have. That is choking, childbirth, and CPR. They are trained to take the caller through that type of emergency with just right over the phone, and it is chilling to listen to. It is amazing.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. You mentioned the national standard as it pertained to, hold on. Response time. Yes, thank you. Is that the same thing as a national average?
So back to the statement that I made, it's the NFPA, so it's the National Fire Protection Administration. They recommend in their documents, they recommend that urban fire departments respond within 6 minutes and 15 seconds, but they don't specify the percentile. Right. It's actually intentionally vague. But yet it's something that we all strive to achieve.
Got it. Thank you. And then lastly, is it possible to expand or enhance the community outreach components? I know that time is always limited and staffing is always short, but specifically related to the CERT training, because I know it's very in-depth, but it's also very valuable to that more people can get trained in that. Is there a way to potentially to enhance that?
As with, I think, any government organization, especially in the city, we do have some limitations of our personnel. We have really one public outreach coordinator that handles the coordination of the CERT program. But one of the things that we do is we have our firefighters that go in and also teach the classes. So a class being taught just by Liliana is great, but utilizing our on-duty personnel, including firefighters, fire prevention staff as they have time, et cetera. But there's always room to expand. I would love to hold a CERT class once a month, but it does become rather cumbersome or time on task, it's very significant to put on a class.
Right. Oh, I do have one more question. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping
Please,
in,
please.
Commissioner Jones. Liliana sees that and knows that her programs are extremely popular and is limited on time, and she has taken that information, has actually done some train the trainer classes through CERT. The idea being,
Right,
she's
right.
given those tools to the community, let's have that expand within the community with those same people. So as Commissioner Rodriguez was saying earlier, kind of breaking down that wall of public and private interaction, now to expand that momentum with train the trainers, and now the idea being that whole neighborhoods will have
Right.
CERT qualifications or skills.
Yeah, thank you. That's tried and true. I do have a question, the last questions, thank you all for indulging me, with regards to the Fire Prevention Bureau, which is small but mighty, as you'd mentioned. How are those individuals selected or determined, and what kind of training or certifications are required to be in that role?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Jones. Good question. They go through a testing process just like they would for any other member of the fire department. It's a very specific background, so you can think about there's a fire suppression operations side of the fire department, and then there's a fire prevention, fire investigation side of the department. Some of those commingle when it comes to training and understanding. Some of those are completely opposite. In other words, folks on my staff have some of that law enforcement training that I was talking about, where some of the folks running around on the fire engines don't have any of that whatsoever. So it's definitely a different path, both educationally and through certification. So many of the certifications that the fire suppression folks hold are through the California State Fire Marshal's office, and there is a whole other section of those certifications for fire prevention and fire investigation. So they're state certified in specific disciplines, either whether it be in a fire prevention level, at a fire investigation level, both. Even those plan checks I was talking about, there's a certification to obtain to even do those correctly. So it's a lot of training, it's a lot of certification. A lot of those folks we hire, part of the beauty of working in Santa Barbara is that we get very qualified people that want to work here. So a lot of those folks that come and apply here have a very big pile of those certifications before they even walk in the door.
Gotcha.
So that helps a lot, and then we'll fill in the gaps of what else they need as they get their future career underway.
Thank you. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay, I just have one question, okay, 1.5 questions. Following up, though, on some really good questions by Commissioner Jones, I want to know at what point when you're investigating a fire and it appears to be arson or criminal, how do you collaborate with the police department or the detectives, and who's the lead, or how does it work, and who does search warrants?
Yeah, Chair Dorzer, good question. There are, I will be the first to say that I am blessed, honored, I don't know what the right word is, to have a working relationship with the police department the way we do, whether it's in fire investigations or day-to-day activities on incidents. I can't think of a lot of other jurisdictions that can say that. There are some out there, but the day-to-day interaction I have with my fellow police officers is outstanding. I made 3 phone calls driving over here to the police department about something I was working on, and they went above and beyond to give me assistance. So that collaboration comes into play when we're at an incident and I'm in my head thinking, this looks intentional or criminal in nature. Usually what happens is we'll focus on the fire scene part of it because that's our expertise. It's not the police department's expertise to process a fire scene. That's what we're trained to do and come up with our conclusions. So what we'll do is we'll lean on the police department maybe for more like interviews, some follow-up questions with neighbors. That's the kind of interactions they do a lot more of, and they're a lot more proficient at than we are. There's a lot of the times where, we don't sit there in Rochambeau and go, whose case is this, right? It's most of the time we collaborate on fire investigations. It's a fire incident that we're getting assistance from for the police department. So we carry out our investigations the same way, right? So if the folks on the fire engines were go to a single-family dwelling structure fire, it would be our call, but the police department would help with road closures, right? And making sure public stays out. Same thing on the investigation side. It's our incident. We'll take it all the way through court, but that doesn't mean I can't use some reports of investigation techniques or interviews that some police officers did for me and wrote it under my case number, and we put it all together and collaborate that way. Yeah, or we'll, exactly, thank you, Chief Mills, or we'll collaborate together. I have jumped in a black and white police car before to go to the police station to interview somebody, a suspect or somebody of interest at their police station. They'll help us record those. It works the other way too, where I've had police officers in my vehicle, in a fire department vehicle, collaborating to go try to figure out what this case is all about and trying to put the pieces together. So it's a great partnership. We have a very high success rate because of that collaboration, and I can't think of a better instance that we don't drop everything for each other's departments to help them get what they need done.
Thank you. Sounds like we all benefit from a great relationship. Okay, my half question that's very easy. You said that you do a lot of training at the Douglas Preserve. Do you guys also do dog rescues there?
You want me to get it? You want to get it? I'll get it. You're giggling.
Can we just say yes? Yes, we do.
Yes?
Yes, we do. It's actually not uncommon for us to.
Yes.
And you have to take it one step further. It started as a dog rescue and then became a dog rescue and a human rescue.
Yes.
So not uncommon at all. The dog will be 40 feet down and the handler will be 20 feet down and realize that they can't go down or can't go up. Very common for us to rescue dogs. And of course, anybody that knows me knows I'm a dog lover. We treat dogs like family, and we have specialized equipment that we can put them in specific. We have canine harnesses that we will put them in and then bring them up on a rope system.
Thank you. That's wonderful to know. Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
Item number 7, annual report on community oversight.
Good afternoon, Chair Dozer and members of the commission. I'm Barbara Anderson, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator. And this afternoon, I'll be sharing our first ever annual report on community oversight. So this report was included in the new duties and authorities adopted by Mayor and Council for the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. So the ordinance states that the police monitor role within the City Administrator's Office will coordinate with the Commission to submit an annual report and work plan for City Council. The report may include information and input on items such as, so not exclusive, but the Commission's activities during the year, evaluation of the workload and capacity of the Commission to address priority issues, and a summary of the number, type, and disposition of complaints filed. So that latter piece is a whole separate report that will follow this report. I did want to take a moment to emphasize that this report is coming directly from the City Administrator's Office, and in particular my role as Police Monitor. To clarify, again, the Police Monitor is an independent public service, and monitoring use of force incidents, complaints, as well as internal investigations within the police department. And of course, I serve as staff liaison to the Fire and Police Commission. So the new civilian oversight system. So during the adoption of the new duties and authorities by Mayor and Council, they also decided to reconstitute the Fire and Police Commission and directed staff to facilitate that special recruitment, as you know. So this took place in the fall of 2023. 4 of you were appointed during that process. We did have an unscheduled vacancy. We had a commissioner resign. And so we did do a special recruitment several months into the year last year due to that unscheduled vacancy, and Commissioner Jones was appointed and joined us at that time. We also retained the expertise of Hassan Aiden of the Aiden Group LLC to advise the city City Administrator's Office on implementation of the new civilian oversight system, as well as the creation of the new role of police monitor. He is joining us this afternoon, available for any questions or insights that the commissioners have and want him to speak to, both for my presentation as well as the presentation on complaints and investigations. So one of our main objectives last year was to address the new orientation and training requirements that were included as part of the ordinance. As you know, these requirements were very comprehensive and required a significant amount of time to complete. We also wanted to make sure that the public was brought along on the educational journey. So we worked to integrate the trainings into our public meetings so that they would be recorded, accessible, and could be referred back to by the public. We covered the requirements of Section 816 of the Charter, and of course, the new Chapter 2.09 of the Municipal Code, as well as the Political Reform Act and California's Brown Act. We also covered the complaint process, SB2 requirements, use of force policy and investigative process, and what's known as POBAR and FOBAR, which is the California Public Safety Officers Procedural Bill of Rights Act, as well as the California Firefighters Procedural Bill of Rights Act. And we covered additional trainings with guest speakers, which included the overview of the criminal justice system, critical incident response policy, and crisis intervention training and the co-response team program. So ongoing are some of the ride-alongs. And I know that these experiences have been really valuable for commissioners as you've participated in them. And we also still have a training on the history of race and policing. We are working this as an opportunity for broader community engagement and also inclusive of diversity of speakers. So that will come later on this year. So beyond completing the orientation and training requirements, there were a number of key accomplishments last year. We completed the audit of the Santa Barbara Police Department. We also started the first ever quarterly reporting on complaints. And we completed the commission's first work plan, so that will be part of our presentation to council. We also recently reviewed the complaint form and the commendation form, and that has since been implemented both in English and Spanish across the departments that receive those complaints. So as you know, the audit included 5 key components in its scope of work. The department's complaint process, the need for executive development and leadership training, employee retention and recruiting, use of force training and review, and general policy compliance. The commission received the audit report in April of last year that included 31 recommendations for improvement. So at the time you received the report, 19 of those recommendations had already been implemented. To date, 25 of those recommendations are being implemented and have been implemented. There's also several still in process. You will receive a report on the audit earlier in the fall. So that timing for us was critical, that we would have a year after receipt of the audit. There's a number of things that were, again, already in process. The chief has led a lot of policy review, changes, adaptations, and so you'll hear about that in detail later this year. It is the job of the commission, as well as my role, to monitor implementation of those audit recommendations. So the audit also highlighted several other areas that the commission went into depth in last year. So the recommendation around the commission providing feedback on the employee evaluation process, that was completed. Also, the audit highlighted the significant number of calls for service that were related to behavioral health issues. So we did 2 in-depth presentations on that, learning about the programs, how we respond to those calls for service, and expanding our ability to have licensed clinicians respond with law enforcement to those calls. And lastly, there was a good amount of emphasis in the audit report on personnel safety and well-being. We had just recently the presentation on public safety wellness, both highlighting the programs and initiatives at the fire department as well as the police department. So specific to complaints and investigations and leading up to the annual report on complaints and investigations from the police department, I wanted to highlight kind of my role and our working relationship, especially with community accountability. So I meet weekly with the commander of community accountability to review complaints received, status of investigations, and dispositions. I also specifically monitor and follow up on complaints received through the city administrator's office, and I have met with complainants to help walk them through the complaint process, what to expect, the avenues which they feel comfortable submitting those complaints, the expected timeline, the type of communications that they could receive. Additionally, we review the use of force incident data in investigations. So I wanted to share, as part of my reviews and periodic audits, a few observations that I've had over the last year. So I really wanted to highlight the increased rigor of documentation for reporting and the higher utilization of professional standard software like IAA Pro. This has enabled us to have much more reliable data. Our reporting, as you'll see this afternoon, is much more thorough. I'm also able to access, any part of that investigation from beginning to end. And I will say the organization now is better than ever. And so it's just the ease of being able to access information at any time is exemplary. The more formal and consistent communication with complainants and officers involved. So this was actually raised as part of the audit. This was already being undertaken by the chief as she assumed new leadership. But that constant communication with both the complainant and the police officer involved, I've seen firsthand, and then enhancement of that post-investigation communication. So I've been looped into several responses of explaining to a complainant why a complaint was sustained, not sustained, exonerated, and beyond. The level of detail that's provided, again, has expanded exponentially, and I think is really helpful for all parties involved. There's also a shortened internal timeline for completion of investigations. So the national standard for completing investigation is usually a year. The internal department policy is about 120 days. You'll hear from Commander Corbett in a little bit that we're averaging about 99 days for completion of those investigations. So again, really looking at that audit recommendation of 90 to 120 day timeline and really falling in to that, again, we can't say best practice, but national standard, I should say, but achieving that to a greater degree. I also wanted to highlight the more thorough documentation of de-escalation efforts. That was also a piece that was highlighted in the audit. And because of the new processes that the chief has put into place, there's really this opportunity for us to capture the de-escalation as part of that investigation. And I have been able to read some of them. It's amazing, actually, to read. It really affirms that our officers go above and beyond. And I appreciate that the chief has implemented this part of the investigation process to facilitate this level of documentation. And honestly, I can't wait to have more opportunity and more exposure to that as well. So again, happy to answer questions in terms of my role when Commander Corbett and Chief Gordon speak to the annual report on complaints and investigations, but I at least wanted to share some high-level observations from my work with them in the last year.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I just have a couple of slides, Chair Dozer, on priorities. I know, in my communication and meeting with and working with leadership of the commission over the last year, really heightening and elevating the priority around community engagement. So I've shared with you, and I want to share with the broader public, that really strengthening this and making sure that we're engaging the broader public in the work of the commission is key. And I know that we all appreciate that the commission has been elevated to the level that our meetings are streamed live, they're recorded, they're accessible by the public at City Hall, but many of you expressed the want to be more in community, meeting with our residents where they feel most comfortable and in their neighborhoods. So this will be a priority, along with creating more pathways for the community to access information and resources. So I know the city website can be navigated by some, but not by all, and could we get a little bit more creative in making sure that we're sharing the information and the great work that the commission's doing. The last piece is really learning from other jurisdictions, and I would say continuing to learn. So review-based models of oversight are the majority of what is practiced across the nation. So I think we can adapt and improve based on what we research, including conversations with staff and colleagues from other commissions. This was a significant part of my outreach as we were creating the ordinance and creating the system that I would love to kind of return to now that we have a year under our belt on implementation. Mr. Aiden has also been able to provide a broader national perspective to our work here locally, and he's affirmed our approach and will continue to advise us in that regard. The last piece is just speaking to what happens next. And so the ordinance does require for us to submit the annual report as well as the work plan to council for formal adoption. So after this meeting, your insights, your feedback will be incorporated. We'll have that formal written report as well as presentation, much like you've received here, to go to council. We're anticipating this for March 15th. And again, we'll work with you to make sure that once we get closer to that date, how the commission chooses to engage and things, again, comments that we can incorporate, we'll be able to do that. So happy to take any questions on my report at this time.
Go ahead, commissioners.
I'm interested in the documentation regarding de-escalation, which
Yes,
sounds
yeah.
like it's both interesting and something that maybe the commission would like to be able to review directly. Is that something that can happen?
Yeah, Chair Dozer and Commissioner Hill. Yeah, we actually have been talking about when we speak to our use of force annual report, perhaps highlighting some examples there. So we're working through that in terms of what can be shared in a public forum, but we hope to be able to expose you to that.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
I just want to acknowledge that this is a milestone that we've reached. We had a full year of this commission. It was a learning curve with many new commissioners, new chief, new role on the commission, and a new liaison. And we had a lot of training, a whole lot of training. So I just want to congratulate everyone, all the commissioners and staff and departments and chiefs that we finished this year. And I'm looking forward to next year and really getting into some work. So just good job, everyone, and congratulations.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you very much. Question about the training on the history of police, race and policing. Who is being solicited to facilitate that?
So Chair Dozer and Commissioner Jones, we have several recommendations for speakers and panelists. We are kind of going through that list. I've had a couple of conversations so far, and multiple recommendations, both from commissioners, and so welcome additional, as well as Mr. Aiden and the police department from trainings that they've experienced. So we're culling that list. Not only do we want to have diversity of lived experience, professional experience, but also we're looking at national, state, and local level perspectives that I think would be helpful. So still very much in process and welcome any suggestions. Yeah.
Thank you. And then you mentioned an audit report from April. I don't think I was here at that point, and I don't know that I've actually seen it.
You were not, and happy to give you the full audit report. Everything's available again on the commission website. I'll direct you specifically to the presentation, I think it's 52-page audit report, as well as we have a matrix for status of implementation of recommendations at that time that will again update earlier in the fall, that we'll share that as well with you.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Following up on that, I noticed that I think there's 2 items on that recommendations that weren't noted. I'm just curious about the status of those.
Yes, Commissioner Rodriguez, there was 2 recommendations. One was declined, again, just in terms of our department policies and procedures. And correct me if I'm wrong, Commander Corbett, there was 1, 2 that's still under discussion, 1 that's under discussion. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions from the commissioners or comments? Commissioner Herlinger?
I just echo, I think it was an excellent report, so thank you.
Is there any public comment on this?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any public comment. Moving on
Perfect.
to item number 8, Santa Barbara Police Department Annual Report on Complaints and Investigations.
Good afternoon, Chair Dozier and Commissioners. So before we get started with the awaited facts and figures, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the work and collaboration that's occurred to get us to where we are today. I think, to Commissioner Rodriguez's point, there was a lot of work into the formation of the commission, but there's also been a lot of work in this past year. And I just want to acknowledge that and the level of collaboration that has occurred to get to where we are today. The Santa Barbara Police Department is an excellent organization, so I'm going to lead with that. We strive to have the community, our team, and other agencies view us exactly that way. The low number of complaints that you're going to see today is not by accident. The team, and I refer to all of it, the whole department, professional staff, sworn staff, has put together several systems in place that all work together to get us to the point where we are right now. We've increased our community engagement, our number of social media posts. We had over 600 social media posts last year. We now have included where we're not just doing English posts, we're doing Spanish as well. So we're trying to make sure that we're being culturally sensitive and reaching that. We've done 2 Spanish-speaking community academies in the last few months. We've improved our complaint process. We've implemented more procedural justice internally and externally, because we know that the way in which we serve our department internally then relates to how we serve our community. We have to start within the 4 walls of the department so that we ensure that we are procedurally just with our community. But that starts to make sure that we are procedurally just with our employees as well. We've expanded our wellness programs. You guys received a presentation on that. So not just about peer support, but an overall pushing in and leaning into that and getting away from the old model of suck it up. But now expanding that to physical fitness and other things. I think Ms. Anderson made a comment yesterday about there's some weight loss going on within the department. And it's not just the weight loss. There is a reinvigorated push to be healthier. So it's not about weight or anything else, but there has been a significant cultural shift within the department as a result. Increased training. You'll see our training numbers, but I'm very proud of the amount of training that we're doing. More leadership training, more use of force training, more critical incident training. The combination of all of it and not just one. Improved use of force investigations, improved use of technology. We've now started doing our own internal auditing, increased our own internal level of accountability. So putting all of those, and those are not even all of them, but it is multiple systems that are all working together to get us where we're at today and improve our relationship with the community and our service to the community, but as well as how we're serving each other within the department. I'm extremely proud of the work that the team's been doing and will continue to do. Change is hard, but the team has made an active decision to roll up their sleeves and make it happen. The department will continue to grow, adapt, and move forward, and continue to do the hard work. So I just wanted to lead with that as we get into this presentation. So.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Dozer and members of the Commission. And thank you, Chair Rodriguez, or I'm sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez, for that. I was part of the CFC, in watching those meetings, and it's been thousands of hours to get here, so. Okay, we're going to start with just an overview of what the presentation details are going to include. We're going to have a lot of information coming at you. So we're going to start with a review of the complaint and investigation process, which I did almost a year ago, but we're going to do a quick review of that. A review of the complaint dispositions and different adjudications that you're going to hear about. And then we're going to get into the 2023 complaint investigation information data, which includes the complaint types and origination data, the dispositions, the adjudications, policy sections, and SB2. And finally, we're going to talk about the training requirements and the data and the thousands of hours that the SBPD has attended training in 2023. When a complaint is received, the department's goal is always to conduct an honest and fair fact-finding process that uncovers the truth, including maintaining a process that really protects the rights of all involved, including the accused officer. So I want to do a quick review of our process when a complaint is received. So it starts with complaint intake, whether that is a citizen complaint or an administrative complaint. Our goal that we've talked about several times over the course of the year has always been to reduce the barriers to the community within the complaint process. I believe we've made strides in that with the new complaint process, and you'll see when we talk about where the complaints have been received from. Complaints are then routed to community accountability. So regardless of how they're received, they all come to community accountability. The complaint is reviewed and the chief is briefed on that complaint. Then the complaint is assigned to an investigator. An investigation is conducted. Contacting the complainant and notifying the subject officer is one of the first things that happen in this process. And then there's ongoing communication with both the subject officer, the complainant, and with community accountability throughout this process. Once the complaint is, or the investigation is completed, it is approved through the chain of command. All recommendations are made by a commander at this point. The findings are communicated with the officer, and as much as possible, this is always done in person, regardless of what the findings or the outcome of the investigation is. As I mentioned before in one of the presentations, our officers, their care of the community, even when they get a complaint that is unfounded or exonerated, I often have officers coming to me and asking, what could I have done differently? You know, it upsets them to find out sometimes that the community is, you know, unhappy about the service. And some of them come to me and say, what could I have done differently? I know it was exonerated or it was unfounded, but is there something, you know, that I could do differently to make this situation better if I were to encounter it again? Throughout this entire process, we provide ongoing updates to the independent police monitor. Finally, within 30 days of the disposition or the complaint being completed, that is communicated with the complainant as well. That's often done by mail and sometimes by phone call, and if they're always given my number at this point, it's going to be Commander Katsapis in the future, to contact with my direct phone line to my desk, to contact me if they have any questions or they want to review anything specific. I do get quite a few phone calls and spend some time talking to some of the complainants once they receive their disposition letter. As Barbara Anderson mentioned already, I'm very proud that this year our complaints, our average time to close those complaints was 99 days. So our complaint types. Our first type I'll talk about is our administrative complaints, and this is an internal complaint or investigation. It's generated by another employee or by a supervisor within the department. Any department member becoming aware of possible misconduct notifies the supervisor to review for investigation. In 2023, we had 6 administrative investigations. And then we have citizen complaints. This is a complaint that results from a member of the public bringing forth a concern about a member of the Santa Barbara Police Department. Complaints by the public can be made in any form. This includes writing, by email, in person, telephone, or online, and we also accept anonymous and third-party complaints as well. In 2023, we had 20 citizen complaints, and I put in the complaint origination here so that you can see about 60% came through our online portal. And that online portal, that comes directly to the Community Accountability Office when somebody completes that online form. 5 people came into the lobby, filled out a complaint form, and in most cases are able to speak directly with the watch commander. And then 3 went directly to the city administrator's office and to Barbara Anderson's. For a little bit of context, I wanted to provide to you some of our data and some of our numbers. In 2023, officers responded in person to 47,232 calls for service. Those calls could be one officer, they could be 10 officers, they could take several hours to resolve or 15 minutes. So the number doesn't give us the whole story, but the 47,232 calls, that's 129 calls per day, every day of the year. Officers made 3,989 arrests, 970 which were felony arrests. And in 2023, they conducted over 4,000 traffic stops, 4,078 to be exact. So within all those numbers, we received 20 citizen complaints. If all the complaints came in about the 2023 year, that would result in 99.96% of contacts that did not result in a citizen complaint. So I'd like to do a quick review of our complaint dispositions. Every case that comes in that we investigate will land on one of these dispositions. We have unfounded, which is going to be that the investigation clearly established the allegation is not true. Exonerated, which means the investigation established the employee's actions that formed as the basis of the allegations were the complaint was not in violation of law or agency policy. Not sustained, which just means that the investigation failed to disclose sufficient evidence to clearly prove or disprove the complainant's allegations. And finally, sustained, which means the investigation disclosed sufficient evidence to prove the truth of the allegation by a preponderance of evidence. So as you can see, in 2023, we received a total of 26 complaints or investigations, and that encompasses both our citizen and our administrative complaints. The dispositions of those 26 complaints are as follows. We received 8 that were determined to be unfounded at the basis of the completion of the investigation. There were 9 that were determined to be exonerated, 1 that was not sustained, and 8 that were sustained. So understanding the different adjudications for sustained violations, and we'll have some numbers on this that come up, but I wanted to make sure when I provide a term that we understand that what we're talking about. We start with corrective counseling. When I start, I'm just starting at the top of the slide. So corrective counseling is written documentation of a counseling with a subordinate as a result of a violation of policy or procedure. It can include remediation training, and it may be included in their annual evaluation at the end of the year. A written reprimand is a written action taken as a result of a policy violation, and it will also include remediation training, which you'll see that's standard, that we include remediation training within any of the sustained violations. We have a suspension, which is days off without pay for a specific period of time. Demotion, which is generally a reclassification from one position to another, generally of lesser responsibility, or a termination, which is a separation of the officer or the employee from their employment with the department. So in addition to this discipline imposed, officers often have additional training required as a result of a sustained violation. Remediation training ensures that the policy or procedure expectations are clearly understood and that the training supports the department's expectation. This includes a number of things, which is advanced training courses, external training courses, having them conduct briefing trainings and bring back that training to the department, completing training bulletins for the department, additional decision-making training if that's determined to be what's needed, advanced vehicle operation training. Additionally, we have officers that attend training with some of our local service providers and some of our partners in the community, such as Domestic Violence Solutions, Child Protective Services, or STETSA.
And I just want to make a comment. When you're looking at the sustained dispositions with the results, and also in conjunction with the training that Commander Corbett just talked about. Discipline's not meant to be punishment. Discipline is meant to make someone a better employee. So that's why we look at it in a holistic approach based on the sustained violations, the totality of the circumstances, and all of the things combined. Because like I said, it is our goal to make them a better officer. It is not our goal to have this as, discipline is not supposed to be punishment. It has to be appropriate for the violation, but our ultimate goal is to make them a better employee into the future. And sometimes we determine that they should no longer be an officer. So that is also a piece of it. That's not a punishment tool. That is what we've determined that they should not continue to be an officer with the department based on the totality of the circumstances. So I just want to make that distinction and the way in which we, view the process.
Okay, so in 2023, we had 8 sustained investigations from complaints. Of those sustained investigations, 3 resulted in corrective counselings, 1 resulted in a written reprimand, 2 resulted in suspensions, there was 1 demotion and 1 termination. So what this slide shows is our complaint investigations by policy. I've broken this down and separated it by blue and red to show the citizen complaints as compared to the administrative complaints. The following is the main policy violations that were investigated. Some investigations have more than 1 policy violation. So starting at the top, we had 1 for retaliation. We had 1 for insubordination. We had 1 for unauthorized access of confidential records. We had 1 for supervisor failure to report, 2 for excessive force, 9 for unsatisfactory work performance, 5 for rude and discourteous treatment, and 6 that fell under biased conduct or bias-based policing.
Okay, so I was going to say, where did our hyperlink go? Okay, so I'm going to cover this portion. As you may or may not know, I am also a post commissioner and sit on the post commission at the state level. So as a post commissioner, besides my role here as chief, we've been working through the SB2 process at the state level and working through all of the requirements of SB2. So I want to give you a bigger picture as we talk about and get into some specific facts for here in Santa Barbara. Just to review, these are the 9 areas of misconduct that fall under SB2, that they have to be within 10 days of the allegation reported to the state. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not there is any basis for the allegations. Just a mere allegation that comes in a complaint has to be reported to the state. So even if we review the body camera or whatever facts we have at that moment and we're like, didn't happen, it doesn't matter. We still have to report it within the 10 days. And we always have to complete an investigation from start to finish. So we still have to complete that investigation. So the 9 areas of misconduct are abuse of power, physical abuse, biased conduct, sexual assault, participation in a law enforcement gang, acts that violate the law, failure to cooperate with an investigation, failure to intercede, and dishonesty. I can tell you that as a result of now the state collecting data and working through this process, there will be some changes recommended legislatively because it does not cover everything. Not all termination cases within the state will result in a decertification because they have to fall specifically within these 9 categories. So, and I also want to note that we as a law enforcement agency are now required to consult the decertification index at the state level for anyone that we hire. And this is all reported to the national level as too. So we have to go to post anyone that we hire, ask them if there is any discipline that is related to this, and as well as then the National Decertification Index. So I just want to give the big picture on this. And the timing of it is actually great because last week at my meeting, we got to preview this, and it actually became public today. So we were able to then pull this up today so that we can share this with you. This is what now is on the Post website. So they now have a database that is accessible for the public to show how many cases are going to the state under SB2, how many they have gone through, how many they have remaining, and how many cases have been closed. And then you can actually click on individual departments. So you will see, you can pick on, whichever department you want to see, and you will be able to pick on that department. So I wanted to bring that up because I think it is a helpful tool, because I think the numbers, when you look at it, because they are working through a huge backlog of cases, because there were also old cases that we all had to submit. I can tell you, in March, it will be the first cases that the commission actually hears related to decertification. There's an advisory board that has heard their first set, and now those recommendations will be coming to the commission. So I think in March for our commission meeting, I think we're hearing the two first at a commission level. Once the commission hears them, they have the opportunity to go to an administrative law judge. Ultimately, they will come back to the commission for final recommendation. So there is multiple steps. It is a long process. But I think, you can see the overall number of 23,485. That's what the state is currently working through. So it was important to me, like I said, the timing was great because it just got released this morning, that we were able to share and show that. So for us, within this last year, just based on the categories and the allegation, that doesn't mean whether they were sustained, not sustained, we reported 10 to post. So when you saw on the previous slide, you saw the number of, based on it was just an allegation of bias, right? That automatically requires us to make that allegation report to post. And then we have to follow up. We have to provide them with the ultimate results of our investigation, a copy of our investigation, and then they decide whether they're going to take action. So they review them all. So there is another layer of review external to us on all that fall within these 9 categories. So I wanted to make sure you had a big picture understanding, and I know we've talked about SB2, but talking about it and actually seeing it in action are very different as we work through it, since it is such new legislation. And like I said, we've all identified, we had a really robust conversation at a training I was at last week about some of the things that we have identified as a commission, as post, the advisory board, some areas that really need some additional work. So you'll see I think you'll see some changes to the legislation in the next year, but this is all coming to fruition as it is, so.
Okay, we're going to move on to training. Effective continual training provides officers with tools to better understand and respond to the needs of the community. In addition to that, it provides our officers with the confidence that they need to go out and do a really difficult job. There are a minimum number of training hours required by post to maintain peace officer certification. The SBPD provided for significantly more training than is required by post. Under Chief Gordon, prioritized training, and you're going to see on the next slide, or a few slides in, exactly how that was done. We have numerous instructor cadres with officers who attend advanced training to become subject matter experts, and then they bring that training back to the department and also to the academy. Some examples of our instructor cadres are our first aid cadre, our peer support cadre, arrest and control, our active shooter training cadre. We have about 8 to 10 cadres right now. So when an officer is hired and becomes a recruit, they attend a 24-week post academy to become a sworn officer. After that, they come back and they spend over 16 weeks with one-on-one with field training officers for one-on-one training. Once they complete that and they're solo patrol officers, they also have another minimum of 24 hours every 2 years of post-training that's required. And as I stated, training is really prioritized. It's continually evaluated to make sure that what we're providing to them in the classes are both professionally and culturally relevant. So the post-training required for 2 years includes tactical firearms of 4 hours, driver training of 4 hours, arrest and control of 4 hours, strategic communications of 2 hours, use of force at 4 hours, and first aid at 8 hours. This is a 2-year cycle. So I know there's a lot to absorb on this slide. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I do want to note that the total hours in 2023, and this is external training. This is training that we sent officers to. Some of it's done internally, but this is the training courses, was 8,366 hours. That doesn't include briefing trainings or, those trainings that happen spontaneously as a result of maybe critical incident calls or the type of calls that are higher risk, that we have that one-on-one training that happens after with a debrief with the sergeant. Many of our community-based organizations help out on training and come in and do briefing trainings. That's not captured in here. What we have in here is, such as driver training. That's part of our 2-year cycle there. But we have our CIT training, our investigative training, which I broke out on another slide for you to see, which includes many different topics. We have, our patrol specialty training, which includes things like bicycle training and specific specialty classes for our patrol officers to gain in confidence and competence. Wellness and peer support, our leadership development and executive development training. Use of force training. We had a training that brought in use of force training for all of our supervisors from the sergeant all the way through assistant chief level, and community policing.
And just want to note, when Chief Malekian was the interim chief, he started to prioritize leadership training. And we have continued that, as you can see, and not just at the executive level, but at all levels of the department as we continue to grow, plan for succession, and continue to really mentor our officers. So I just want to acknowledge, that was a priority started by Chief Malekian, and we have continued just to push into that and really expand that process.
So this slide shows just the 840 hours of investigative training alone. And so as you can see, there's numerous courses that our investigators, and some of these are officers that are preparing to be investigators or stepping into the role of investigator. Everything from human trafficking training, electronic surveillance, to threat management, narcotics investigations. That includes a significant amount of fentanyl training and fentanyl awareness. Sexual assault investigations and our officer-involved shooting investigations are a significant amount of that, search and seizure, and more. I want to talk a little bit about our crisis negotiation response team and our SWAT team, as they have additional training outside of what you just saw on the previous slides. The mission of the Santa Barbara Police Department Crisis Negotiation Response Team is to diffuse potentially life-threatening situations through the use of proven verbal crisis management techniques. The ultimate goal is peaceful resolution of critical incidents, minimizing risk to all involved, including the victims, suspects, and officers. Our CNR team members also respond in coordination to SWAT calls and regularly respond to in-progress calls that have increased need for expertise in negotiation, de-escalation, and communication. Currently, our CNRT team consists of 10 officers, 2 sergeants, and is overseen by 2 commanders. So the CNRT team members participated in 2023 in 767 hours of training. This includes 160 hours of external training at FBI Hostage Negotiator School, and then 617 hours of monthly team trainings. They train 8 times a year, and at least two of those, will include a joint training with the SWAT team. So some of those trainings include tactical communications, language barrier communications, juvenile issues, suicidal subjects, ethnic awareness, and various other trainings that they're going to face on some of these high-risk calls.
And I want to point out, these officers, this is a collateral duty for them. So they are, CNRT full-time, but the benefit of all this additional training is that when they're handling a average everyday call for service, they still have all this extra training and all these extra skills. So it's not just important to when we have that big call out, with SWAT and CNRT, but these are skills and additional training that is used every day in the response to different situations. whether it's co-response or whether it's patrol or whether it's investigations, they have these additional skills and this additional training. So I just want to make that a note. CNRT is not a special team that only, comes out and those skills are only used in that big incident. These skills are being used every day, and this training is vital to that as well. So I just want to make that distinction and why this is so valuable and important.
So our special weapons and tactics team is similarly, it's also a part-time collateral position. And our officers that are part of this SWAT team are also, they're officers, detectives, they have other full-time duties as well. The mission of the Santa Barbara Police Department, Special Weapons and Tactics Team, is the protection and preservation of life in incidents of a critical or high-risk nature. A Special Weapons and Tactics Team is a designated group of law enforcement officers who are selected, trained, and equipped to work as a coordinated team in an attempt to resolve incidents that may exceed the capabilities of first responders or investigative units. Our SBTP SWAT team is modeled on the best practice standards set forth by California Post and the National Tactical Officers Association. Our team currently consists of 18 officers, 2 sergeants, and is overseen by 2 commanders. So in 2023, our SWAT team members participated in 3,840 hours of training. This includes the 640 hours of training that was on a previous slide, such as basic SWAT school, chemical agent instructor training, SWAT team leader training. In addition to that, the team members participated in 2,240 hours of advanced tactical training, and that's in their monthly trainings. They meet every month. And then also 960 hours of firearm training. Within their training responsibility, they conduct a training plan that includes the core skills and competencies that we're training for that are outlined by the Post Blue Ribbon Report and NTOA. And then after that, there's a debrief, they conduct an after-action report, and everything is very thoroughly documented, so we know all of the training that they did in every case so that we can review and audit it annually if need be. In the training, the training includes such items such as active shooter training, open field movements, chemical agent operator, de-escalation. They work with CNRT, harbor operations, hostage team rescue. Our SWAT team members are, like I said, are also on patrol teams, and they're often the team leaders when we hit higher risk cases that our patrol is on, or even on the regular calls for service. They help, guide and mentor some of the newer officers through learning some of the skills that need to be learned.
And just another point, one of the things with large event safety is we have a lot of big events here in the city. So that is, having this team and the capabilities is crucial for us and our response if something were to happen. And it's also how we handle our pre-response and all of our planning that goes into being prepared for all of these events. So a lot of that is also behind the scenes where you never know that they're there, but they are ready and part of a plan and in response if it's necessary. So, it's not just about that one big moment. There's a lot of things that go on every day that the general public doesn't know that we're doing to make sure that all of these events are safe.
Thank you for putting together, obviously, hours and hours of work to give us all of that information. Let me start by asking, do we have any public comment on this?
Chair Dozer, we do not have any public comment.
Okay, commissioners, do you have questions or comments?
I'll just have a comment, which is
Commissioner Hill.
the most obvious one. Incredible job. What you started off with is that the police department is an excellent department, and everything in the documentation and the presentation supports that. And I think that the commission should consider making a public statement to that effect.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I agree with that. Commissioner Harlinger? No? You're on my screen. I'll go to Commissioner Rodriguez. get rid of you.
So oftentimes, great presentation, thorough presentation. I appreciate the amount of time and effort it took to provide that data, so thank you. Oftentimes when oversight boards are created, it's as a result of a consent decree or a critical event that involved an officer-involved shooting or officer-involved death. We didn't have that take place here. So we started off already in a great position. Having oversight, my hope is that it just allows for more efficient ways and effective ways of being able to communicate the state of our department to our public. I'm thoroughly impressed with the amount of training that's being offered and above and beyond what's required by, like, well above and beyond what's required by post. And I know that, more training leads to automatic response. So it's wonderful to see that. It's also showing in the small number of complaints that are being reported. I would like for us to continue as a commission to continue making the complaint process more known and available to the community. I don't remember his name. Brian, I think, is his first name. He's the monitor for the LA Commission, and he says, I asked him, well, how does he measure his success? And he says, by the amount of public interaction in the commission meetings. And so I would like us to do the same. So I do have a couple questions, though. One, after complaints are completed, I know other jurisdictions, Houston in particular, and Tucson, they're using mediation as a way to kind of put closure on the complaint process. And you mentioned that you're on the phone often with complainants to explain the disposition. I'm wondering if you've considered mediation.
There are different ways. At this point, we don't do it as mediation. We do offer the complainant the opportunity to watch video and have discussions and talk through it. We want them to have a full understanding. I will say we go well beyond what actually is required by law. We try to be as open as we possibly can and share as much information as we can so that we can hopefully come to a resolution that they may not like, but they can understand and have the different perspectives on it. So the mediation, sometimes that can be effective and sometimes that cannot be effective. Like I said, for us, we use the process as how do we make them a better employee. So we work specifically through community accountability so that the complainant makes sure that they feel heard, they understand, having those conversations with the officer, making sure that the discipline is appropriate. Because even if it doesn't result in discipline, we also still have discussions about, although maybe it wasn't a policy violation, about how they could have been better. And as Commander Corbett referred to, our officers really want to be better. When they have a complaint lodged against them, it has a really big impact. They take it really to heart. So we try to balance all of those pieces with it. And making sure that, like, the goal of mediation is to make sure everyone feels heard, so we work through that in a different way.
I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit just to say that after my conversations with some of the complainants that call and I explain either the process or the policy or, what occurred and how we investigated it, almost all the complainants, are very appreciative. I had one that said, is there something I can do to thank the officers for taking care of me? And, so we come out in a good place on the other side of it. So I think that communication and like the Chief Gordon said, the providing them a voice and just the ability to talk to somebody and have somebody to call, like they have my desk line, I think that's just an important step in that community care.
And if a complainant was not satisfied with that, what would be the avenue? I'm assuming that they would be able to bring that to the commission. I just want to use this as an opportunity to educate the public on what a person can do if they're not satisfied with the disposition.
They certainly can, rise to the level of reaching out to Barbara and to the commission to talk about, their concerns with that. But I can tell you, at least in the last year, like I said, they may not always be, happy because they had a negative interaction, but they leave feeling like they're heard and they understand where it's at. And that is our goal with it, is to make sure that they understand, that they are not still extremely upset over the situation. Sometimes there are different things that come into a complaint that sometimes some of their own struggles and their own crisis struggles can affect their ability to hear what we're saying, but we try to take time and patience to work through those. So,
As a mediator myself, I know that just having the opportunity to sit down with, the parties to sit down together to talk about what took place is often healing enough. But I just wanted to make sure the public knew that it didn't end at that investigation, that if somebody was not satisfied, that there are other steps that they can take.
yeah, and they can also they can actually also file a complaint through post directly, and those complaints go to post, but they also get reviewed by post, so.
I just have a few more questions. So you mentioned that there was a backlog at Post to review information or complaints that were sent to them. I'm curious, how long will it take Post to get to 2023 complaints?
They're already working through them and prioritizing them.
Okay.
So they're working through the backlog, but they're also working through the current ones, but they prioritize them on the seriousness, and they can't actually close them until we close our investigation. But they're looking at the most serious cases first that they look at and view that these are potential. Because if they look at one that is potential, they can actually, Director Alvarez at Post can issue a temporary suspension of someone's ability to be a police officer, so your post certificate. So they're looking at those first, and then they prioritize them.
And I think I might need your assistance on this, Attorney Doimus, but there were two complaints in particular that I was curious about, the one demotion and then one termination. Part of the authorities of this commission is to review the process, to review the quality of investigation. I'm assuming that Barbara Anderson would be able to look through that investigation and in more detail than we would. When would that process be able to take place for the demotion and the termination?
Chair Dozier, Commissioner Rodriguez. Yes, Ms. Anderson can anytime look at those files. She has authority, just like I would have authority internally. But as far as the commission, when they would become publicly disclosable, and that would be the exhaustion of that officer's administrative rights. Other than that, I can't go into any further detail, but it wouldn't be ripe at this time, for sure.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, that there's still a further process for those two cases that would have to be completed before they're considered closed.
There's still internal processes for it to be considered closed, and those internal processes include potentially the disposition being changed, so correct.
Okay. So we would guess about a year from now that the commission might be able to review closed cases?
It all depends on when they exhaust it, so as far as anything, I don't have a timeline that I could offer the commission.
Okay. Could I request that if we can monitor the timeline on those two cases, and then for that to be reported, and again, it's not the details, the nitty-gritty of what took place in that complaint, but the process of that complaint. And that's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Thank you. And thank you for that presentation. And it's nice to hear at the top of the presentation, Chief Gordon, you speak to values and principles that I think are fundamental to a functioning, egalitarian, and compassionate society. Things that I think should have been, not necessarily by you, should have been espoused a lot sooner than this, and much more broadly. I don't think what you're offering and suggesting is anything so revolutionary that it should be considered out of the norm. I think what your leadership, what you're describing is actually the new normal. So I applaud you and thank you for that. I do, knowing me, have a few questions, but I do want to follow up on Commissioner Rodriguez's point, and to actually expand the request to not just the termination and demotion, but to all of those that were sustained. So I'm curious as to, and one of my questions is there an example, whether it's with these sustained disciplinary actions or otherwise, of types of actions that would warrant, it doesn't have to be specific to these situations, but what would warrant the level of disciplinary action to get to termination, as an example? What would warrant a demotion? What would warrant a written reprimand?
So, Chair Dozier and Commissioner Jones, like I said, it's based on the totality of the circumstance and the violation. So for a recommendation of termination, it would have to be a policy violation that was egregious, or a pattern of behavior that would be egregious. So you could have an officer that their history and the amount of time, whether it's over a year or over a couple years, where you're seeing repeated violations of the same things, and now they have not changed their behavioral pattern, could in the end result in, something like a demotion or a termination, where you're seeing, demotion would mean that they are already at a supervisor level. So that means that, based on their behavior, their failure to supervise appropriately, that could result in a demotion where they no longer supervise. But termination would have to be several things, or such a violation that would lead to the level of termination. A suspension could be anything from repeated policy violations. It could be someone that has an officer that's been in multiple traffic collisions, at-fault traffic collisions, and has not learned from their prior training and what has happened. So they may end up with a suspension because of the continuing. You could have someone, an officer that violated pursuit policy, and the violations were what we considered egregious enough that it warranted a suspension and not just retraining. Now, they would get retraining along with that suspension. It could be failure to appropriately investigate a particular investigation, where we felt that the behavior and the violation rose to the level where the suspension was necessary based on the violation. And that would also accompany then training, and that could be based on their time on the job. And all these other factors that go into it, their level of training and experience and the time on, we're not looking, we want to make sure we're correcting mistakes, but there's also a level of expectation as the more time on, and your level of knowledge of how you should be handling investigations. So it's hard for me to give you an example, because, finite example, because like I said, we look at it as a holistic piece and a holistic process in terms of how we, at the end, come up with what the discipline is. I can tell you that for us, our commanders make the discipline recommendation, typically, not always, but typically. A sergeant will conduct the investigation, a commander will make the discipline recommendation, and then the assistant chief will be the one that then approves it and approves the discipline. Now, in a case like termination, ultimately that typically is a decision that is issued by the chief of police.
Thank you. That resonates when you say words like egregious or pattern of behavior, that kind of thing.
And if I may add too, in terms of Commissioner Jones, your original request, not everything could be disclosable when I talk about these. So it's not the discipline that makes the document or documents disclosable. It's what the finding was for. So I'll give you an example. There are certain categories that have been by state law that render certain actual ultimate findings at the end disclosable. Dishonesty, excessive force, et cetera. Dishonesty is one that obviously a lot of times potentially, if it's proven, that could lead to termination. But you could also, as the chief was saying, have termination on something that would not be disclosable. Let's say you had a newer officer that had 9 or 10 discourteous treatment incidences, right, within a brand-new career. That may be a pause for concern. While maybe you want to decide to terminate that officer, or through progressive discipline, they had a bunch of incidences all timed up that would eventually lead to termination, the incidents themselves wouldn't be one of the categories that make it disclosable under state law. So it's not the disposition of the discipline, it's certain categories, certain ultimate findings that were sustained that make it disclosable. So there's about 17, 18 categories in all. So not every possible violation that we have are disclosable. I would say, in fact, probably the vast majority of Santa Barbara Police Department policy violations, because you look at the size of the policy manual, the vast majority are undisclosable per state law. There's just about 17 or 18 categories that make those records disclosable. I don't know if you have any questions as to that, or that my explanation was clear as to that.
Thank you. Actually, I have several more, but I'm also very mindful of the time. So, Madam Chair, I don't know if you have any recommendations. Should we keep going, or?
You can keep going. I know we do have a commissioner that must leave in 10 minutes, I believe.
Yeah, I have a 6:30 talk in another part of town, so I have to.
I appreciate that. We'll still have a quorum.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll still have a quorum.
Okay, I'll keep going. Thank you. So then, following that line of thought, is there a correlation between, I'm not sure if it's slide 12 or 13, where there's the first slide that's on the sustained disposition results that has the 8 broken down by category: corrective counseling, written suspension, demotion, termination. And then the following slide, it has the complaint investigation by policy. Is there can you correlate those two? So in other words, we have the 8 that are sustained disciplined. Of which category in the following slide would they fall under? So were the corrective counseling, was that as a result of retaliation? Was that a result of biased conduct? Or was the suspension, was that as a result of the excessive force? Or do you understand what I'm saying?
So I'm going to give you a high-level overview. So some of the ones that were unsatisfactory work performance. There was one that was related to a child abuse case, a child abuse investigation. That was one. There was a complaint that someone made. They were unhappy with being placed on a mental health hold. There was a driver who was upset that they were refused the ability to use their calligraphy pen. There was a complaint that actually came in last year, but that was about a 2007 case that a citation was issued incorrectly. One of them was a custody issue. One of them was a decision-making in relation to a foot pursuit. One was a complaint of handling a call with a mentally ill son. One was a refusal to physically restrain a youth for a mental health hold. One was arrest tactics, where they didn't buckle a arrestee seatbelt. So that gives you, under that unsatisfactory work performance, all of the different ones that were specifically within that. So we tried to keep this so we can give you more, but in trying to put all of that into a slide can get very confusing. So, but those are the ones that, those are the categories of specifically like that unsatisfactory work performance.
I guess my question is there a correlation between any of those and the 8 that actually had a sustained disciplinary action?
Yes, so I can go through this one right here.
It could be, you wouldn't have to go, exhaust it right now, but I'm just kind of, if that
There were
exists.
3 within that list that I just gave you that were sustained complaints.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's that, yeah. So it can be correlated?
Yes.
Or it is correlated? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. With regards to the trainings, the post-trainings, how are they chosen or prioritized? So for example, in the bar graph that you showed, the highest training, 852 hours, was for firearms training, and the lowest was for wellness and peer support. Is there some sort of directive or prioritization in terms of how those trainings are prioritized or chosen?
So it's based on an overall need for the department. So when you see the firearms training, this last year we transitioned to, as part of the budget process, we actually eliminated our range master position. So we had a lot of internal training happen for firearms. Firearms is one of the most, what I would call critical functions of having good, not just firearm safety, but being able to proficiently use your firearm and make the decisions related to your firearm. That is why it is a high priority and will always remain a high priority, because it is one of the biggest areas that is critical to the decision-making process of a police officer. So it is also one of the ones that post requires every 2-year cycle. So last year we tried to get everyone through that piece of that 24 hours. That when you look at that 24 hours, the tactical firearms, every single sworn member of the department has to go through that tactical firearms class in that 2-year cycle. So you'll see some correlation. Last year we got through the first aid training, so you'll see that. But we have to get through all of those in that 2-year cycle. And we get audited by post to make sure we've completed that. So post comes in every 2 years and looks at all of our training records to make sure that we have, every officer has gone through that. And we have to provide a reason to them if an officer did not. So say we had an officer that was off on injury majority of the time or something like that, but we have to provide a reason as to why the officer did not complete their CPT training. So, and part of this is as we prioritize what we are doing. So for us, we've had new investigators. We want to make sure those new investigators are, have all the tools that they can. There's some big areas that really require additional training, such as sexual assault. We have really put an emphasis on making sure that our investigators have the appropriate officer-involved shootings training. So all of our investigators have been going to specialized schools for that, including our supervisors. And we've been trying to send everyone out and not just do everything internal, because when you send someone out, they get perspectives from other agencies and instructors outside of just our little Santa Barbara. So it's making sure we send them out to get that perspective and not just do a balance of internal and external trainings. Traffic safety investigations is extremely important. It's a big portion of what we do here. So we try to prioritize it based on everything that we're doing, along with balancing what we have to do in terms of to meet our post compliance. I think that answers it.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I have more, but I could offline or
Yeah,
afterwards.
I'd be happy to have a separate conversation if you want to really
Yeah, thank
drill
you.
into some of the specifics. Not a problem.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay, I just have more of a comment, but I am open to maybe City Attorney Doimas or the commander or the chief to confirm its accuracy or correct it if need be. But I think it's an important comment regarding the process, and that is the standard of proof that is used during these types of complaint investigations against an officer, and it is a preponderance of the evidence. And for us lawyers, that is basically 50% plus a feather. So it's the lowest standard. So I'm just want to make sure I understood that that's how something is sustained or not sustained based on that standard.
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand what you were saying. So they have to show 50% evidence of proof?
51% that the officer has violated a policy. It's different than a criminal proceeding that is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, or other cases where it's clear and convincing evidence that might be more 75%. So I think it's important for the public to understand it's a lower standard of proof, but it's because it's an administrative process, and we want to correct behavior. We want to make sure that it's addressed, and so the burden of proof is much lower.
And that's the same standard of proof before on civil service hearings, preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not that it happens, so 50.1%.
Okay, I don't think I see any other questions or comments. That was fantastic. Thank you guys very, very much. With that, we are, I believe, on agenda item 9, and it's an opportunity for commission and staff comments or to share any information.
Chair Dozer, Chief Gordon wanted to speak specifically to the public comment, the written public comment that was received most recently in terms of the follow-up.
And not just necessarily in relation to that, but what I wanted to address is whenever we get public comment, whether it come in through public comment to the commission, to Ms. Anderson, or whether it comes in through the department or through a council member, we make a huge effort to make direct contact with the person that has concerns, as we did in this case. There was immediate communication with this person. Their concerns have been addressed and will continue to be addressed. But we make a concerted effort to reach out. We don't ignore them. We always make contact if we can, if they give us any information, but we always try to address that and address those community concerns. It's always a supervisor level, it's always assigned by me, and they always have to report back to me what the conclusion and what steps that they took to address the concerns, as we did in this particular case.
Can you tell us what happened, or what was the?
Well, like in this particular case, their concerns regarding speeding at this particular, we've actually been addressing this for several months. This is not the first complaint that we've received. We've actually done numerous focus areas. We've written 13 citations in the area. We followed up with her to make sure she understood, you don't always see the motor officer, parked there, and we will continue to do those focus areas with our motor officer. So at the end of the conversation, she was appreciative and understood, and we will continue to try to address that. And, we get a lot of traffic concerns, so it's about prioritizing. We can't be everywhere at one time. We're extremely short within our traffic bureau, so we make a concerted effort to try to prioritize and hit all the different focus areas.
And was that directed initially to the commission, or it was directed to the commission?
Yes.
So I'm wondering if there's some possibility. I appreciate that PD's already responded, but for the commission to acknowledge that we know we have received it, and we know that you've been in communication with the PD, kind of part of our own community outreach.
Commissioner Jones, we can confirm that as staff, but any commissioner can respond to the public commenter individually with any follow-up. Mm-hmm.
Can we just include that in the minutes of this meeting, that we acknowledge the response?
Commissioner Herlinger, we can absolutely do that. Yeah.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
I just wanted to know, I know that a few of the former Community Formation Commission commissioners are planning on watching this either live or later, so I invite them and the public to send any comments you have or further questions you have to, I don't know what the Fire and Police Commission email is, but it's on the City Fire and Police Commission website that you can send those questions or comments, and it would be sent to the distribution list, which includes the police department, the city administrator's office, and then each commissioner. So that was one comment. And then also, if you could, in particular the fire chief males, if you could ask Liliana to invite the whole commission to the CERT trainings, to the LISTOS graduations, because those are, I've attended several of them, and they're just, I mean, you really get to see how proud community is to be able to learn new skills and to know that they are part of the fabric of the community that's keeping all of us safe, from teenagers to, abuelitas. And it's just a beautiful thing to participate in. So, and I would love if you would open that up to the whole commission.
Commissioner Rodriguez, I wanted to add to the police department is going to be sharing their community event calendar as well, to keep up to date on their events. So we'll be able to coordinate that much more, I would say, efficiently than we have in the past. And the community academies, both the Spanish-speaking ones on the east side and west side, were really powerful in terms of observations that have been shared by the department with me specifically. So yes, looking forward to more engagement there.
Yeah, I didn't mean to exclude, but the police department has been great inviting us to coffee with the Coppins, so.
Are there any further comments or questions?
Chair Dozer, I just wanted to clarify, there was comments specific to a public statement on behalf of the commission as it relates to the annual report presentations. That would need to be a motion, and a majority of vote would be needed to be able to facilitate that. If the commission felt like doing that at this time, I know that our presentation to council will include that formal report and presentation as well, and so the commission can choose to act on that at the March meeting instead of this meeting too. So it really is open for consideration, but I didn't want to leave that there and not be able to facilitate if you wanted to do something more formally.
Well, may I suggest we leave it, because we kind of closed the item,
Yes, yeah,
so
okay,
maybe we
that's
can
good.
leave it for the March meeting on that.
Damn.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
I was going to make a motion.
We're going to make a motion, but okay.
He wouldn't let me, so.
Yes, it's on the record. City Attorney wouldn't let Commissioner Herlinger. Okay, if there's no objection, let's close this meeting at 6:23, Fire and Police Commission meeting, February 22nd, 2024. Thank you.